Welcome to Jack's Corner, where conservative values make national headlines and truth and reality have a seat at the table. From Louisville, Kentucky, here's your host, Jack Richardson.
Welcome to Jack's Corner, a new podcast with regards to bringing reality and truth to the table. And why? Because reality and truth has been excluded, at least over the last 4 years that we have been through all this chaos. So we need a space at the table, and this is what the podcast and what I intend to do. Now, I'm bringing a new perspective, basically a perspective of the legal and the political together. Because for the last 40 plus years and 30 years, I have been not only in law, but I've also been in Republican Party leadership. Now, I don't want that to sound too partisan because basically Republican principles are very important to me. And I consider myself an equal opportunity criticizer. And yes, I'll criticize Republicans if they stray from Republican principles. And what are those principles? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And when Republicans stray from that, they're going to hear from me. If you stick to the Republican principles, then you're going to have a friend in me, but otherwise not. And I'm going to call you out. So that's important to note right off the bat. But another thing I want you to know is that what I'd hope to accomplish with this podcast is to help people filter out the false narratives. And particularly what we find in conservatives and patriots and Republicans is that they tend to buy into the false narratives that Democrats and the leftists throw out all the time. And that's a dangerous place to be. You got to be cognizant of the trickery that is played on the other side to draw you in. It's kind of like the spider saying to the fly, come into my parlor. Well, they know the web that they've weaved and they're going to suck you into that. Don't let them do that. Again, another thing about the podcast is this is a reality tutorial for those on the right. And I guess the first thing, and as I said in my book, America's Systemic Psychosis, stop being stupid. Don't get sucked into things that the left throws at you. The left, and particularly the Democrats, remember, the things that the Democrats say are real, and particularly their accusations, the accusations of the Democrats are really confessions. And if you really want to know where they're going, all you have to listen to is the accusations they make of their opponents. Now, as a reality tutorial, stop needing to be liked by those who will never like you and never agree with you. And in my book, I mentioned something to the effect of the Republican Party basically needs a national psychiatrist. Why? Because some of them always seem to need to be liked by those who will never like them and never agree with them. So one of the things that I would recommend is getting the book Confrontational Politics by H.L. Richardson. No relation. He was a California assemblyman and he wrote this book, and it's an excellent book. When I was chairman here in Louisville, Kentucky for 10 years, I bought a book for every member on my committee. They needed to know how to be confrontational. I know a lot of people don't like to be confrontational, but guess what? If you join the NFL, be ready for some bruises. And so that's what we need to do. When we enter the political fray, we need to fight. We need to fight. We need to fight for life, liberty, and freedom, and our pursuit of happiness. And we also need to be able to confront those who want to deprive us of that. So Richardson's book is a great book that I would recommend. And I also bought that book for every one of the Republicans in the Kentucky State Legislature. And I forget, maybe 100 or so books, but I wanted them to know basically how to coordinate and how to navigate in the political sphere, because so many of these people get into office and they don't have a clue because they've never grown up with it. Look, I gave my first political speech at the age of 16. So I was engrossed in politics for a very long time. But I got there and I didn't become Republican because I needed to be or I was destined to be. No, I'm Republican because of the principles and the idea of republicanism and conservatism, not because it's what I need to be. As long as their principles stay Republican, stay for freedom, then I'll be with them. I've been at this for a long time. A lot of people that get into government, they have no clue. And so they need tutorials like this. They need to know how to be confrontational because it's a contact sport. If you need to be liked, politics is nowhere you need to be. And practicing law has really kind of prepared me for that because I've had to stand on my feet and argue before appellate courts in the federal system, in the state system, before the Supreme Court in the state system, before district courts and the courts locally here, and before judges and juries. So that has prepared me, particularly with regards to politics and being on that ball field where you're going to have full contact. For some that get in, they don't have that experience and wealth of experience, so they do need tutorials, and particularly, hopefully, what they can possibly get from this podcast and through some of the things that I've published. Now, let's jump into the news of the day. And, we really do need to celebrate. And there's always a time for celebrating. There's time for mourning, but there's time for celebrating. And this is not a time for mourning. It would have been if Harris had won. But Donald Trump won, and we basically escaped disaster by the skin of our teeth. And so, yes, I want everybody to celebrate. Doesn't it feel good to wake up in the morning knowing that Trump will be president on January the 20th? What a great feeling. I remember when Ronald Reagan, after the 4 disastrous years of Jimmy Carter, 21% interest rates, 12% inflation and unemployment. I was so despondent at that time. I couldn't even afford to move out of mom and dad's house. I was wanting to get my life started, but his disastrous presidency stopped that. Well, when Reagan got elected that night, I was just ecstatic. And I remember that. And I remember waking up in the morning feeling so good. Well, here we are again. And this is a new day in America. And Trump is going to be president. And he's learned a lot from what his enemies tried to do to him in his first time in office. But he's learned how people can be disloyal. He's learned how they have been traitors to him. He's learned how to pick people appropriately. And at this time, basically, he needs to have his own administration. But I don't want to get too far astray on this. I just want you to understand that, yes, there's a time for celebrating, and let's do that up until basically the inauguration, but then we've got to get to work. And Trump is already doing that. He's hit the ground running, and he's come up with some really good picks. So yes, it's a new morning in America, and thank God for that. But we can't celebrate too long as the enemies of freedom are already on the move. Right now, they're even trying it. Look what they're trying to do in Pennsylvania with the Senate race there. I want to tell you something. The only way that the left can win is by cheating. The only way that the Democrats win is by cheating. And that's historic. All you have to do is go through the annals of history, and you can see time and time and time again. Take a look. Did you know this? That the only states that Kamala Harris won were the states that required no voter ID. Now, that should tell you everything you need to know about those who want freedom and who want democracy and those who don't. Again, their accusations are really telling you what they're really all about. Here's another good quip that came from The View. Believe me, I'm not a viewer of The View. But what they want to do now is they do what all the left and all the Democrats always want to do. And what is that? They steal the glossary from you, and then they change the meaning of words. And so now they hate this word called mandate. And so Whoopi Goldberg, I think it was, or Behar said, get that word mandate out of your mouth. Well, you see, we did win a mandate, and President Trump does have a mandate, and we have the right to rule with that mandate. But they're going to try to erase that from your glossary. Don't let them do that. And moving on, we've got 53 seats in the Senate. We've got a razor-thin 218 in the House. I kind of wish that Trump would quit picking from the House membership, but I understand that he wants people that he can trust because he couldn't in his first administration. But that's why we can't rest. By the way, here's a little factoid that you may not know. The Republicans have never had more than 54 seats in the Senate since 1917. That shows you how critically important it is for you to be very involved. And no, there is no rest, even for the weary. And so we have to be on guard all the time. But let's take a look at the Trump appointees. And this is really important. Susie Wiles, now she's going to be the new chief of staff. And she is really a good pick. Trump has just come up with some really good picks, but they are also disruptors because we've seen the nature and the character of the people that we're fighting. And we've got to fight back and push back against those who have been warring against our freedoms. So my good friend Mark Meadows, who used to be Trump's chief of staff under his first administration, great friend, and we've had many conversations. He likes Trump's pick for Susie Wiles, and he speaks very highly of her. And knowing Mark as I do, he's good with her as I am, and he's also good with a lot of the other picks, as is also my friend Senator DeMint and Ben Carson, who also served in his cabinet and in the Senate in the previous administration. Let's look at Thomas Homan. Now, he's going to be the new border czar, and I kind of like this. I'm going to nickname him Thomas the Terrible, kind of after the czars of the past in Russia. And he is going to conduct mass deportations because basically what the Biden administration did was treasonous in allowing so many people to cross the border. There's estimates out there from 10.1 million all the way up to 20 million. And this was all by design. I say in my book, American Systemic Psychosis, that this has been a plan since John F. Kennedy's time, where the Democrats were going to flood the country and change the electoral map so that they would be the permanent party in power. And that's not the way it's supposed to work, folks. But anybody that would do that truly is not a constitutionalist and is truly up there for their own purposes and not yours. So anyway, we've got Thomas Homan, and he's going to be a strong person with regard to deporting and getting these people who have been strategically placed in swing states. And like Elon Musk says, if Harris wins, basically what would happen is that there would no longer be any swing states because all the people crossing the borders will be put into swing states and would destroy any selection or opportunity you have for your own opinion with regard to a presidential election. That would be disaster. That would be the end of our country. But Holman will be good. And also the other side will try to give you, make you say, what's the term? A false compassion. That's what they're all about. It's a false compassion. Don't get caught up in false compassions. And, well, you're separating families. Don't do this. This is just not compassionate. I'm going to tell you something. There's not an ounce of compassion in any Democrat because there is no diversity of thought in the Democrat Party. In fact, the Democrat Party is nothing but a cult of death. And all you have to do is take a look at everything they propose, how they vote. And I could sum up the Democrat Party in 3 words: sex, 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 because everything they propose legislative-wise has to do in some way or another with regards to sex and sexual conduct. So much about, what are you going to do about the economy? What are you going to do about the southern border? They don't have any concern about that because their only concern is about themselves and their permanent power. But Eisenhower did deportations, mass deportations, and Obama deported 3 million people during his term. So when the other side starts telling you about and giving you this compassionate ploy, don't believe it. Don't fall into that, again, false narrative. So don't get sidetracked about that. Then Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy. Man, 2 great guys, and it's been so much fun watching them. And they're going to slash government. Isn't it great what Elon Musk did? He said when he cut, 80% of Twitter employees, he says it's amazing what you can do and how little employees you need when you're not interested in censoring and canceling people. And that's what 80% of Twitter used to be all about. But that's also why Elon Musk is not only a great businessman, but the richest man in the world. He knows how these things work. And, the whole reason we have such a bloated government, I want you to think about this for a minute. The reason we have a bloated government is because they are appointed by the Democrats. And guess what those employees do? They are paid by your tax dollars. And those Democrat employees in this bloated federal government make donations to the Democrats. Why do you think they were able to raise over $1 billion for this election? So just remember that this bloated government can be trimmed down and needs to be trimmed down drastically for your own freedoms. And I think Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy are great picks. Tulsi Gabbard, again, she's going to be great in the Department of National Intelligence. She knows what the enemy is because they tried to do her in. And then we've got Matt Gaetz. Well, here's my beef with the hand-wringing, sanctimonious Republicans at times. So on screen, you're going to see two pictures, and these are important. These are the people that got through confirmation for Biden. And take a look at these. I mean, you got Rachel Levine, Assistant Secretary of Health. Seriously? You got Sam Brinton, a deputy assistant secretary. Seriously? By the way, he was arrested for stealing luggage at airports. Now, we get these people, and Biden get these people into his administration, but we've got Republicans that are wringing their hands and acting so sanctimonious about some of Trump's picks. Come on, get over yourselves. This is not a time to be parsing around and playing around and acting so self-righteous. And I don't think that Trump should get anything but what he has already chosen, and he needs to have a loyal Senate. Get over yourselves with regard to advise and consent and being so caught up in that. No, you owe Donald Trump his administrative picks and who he wants in his cabinet. I think you get the point. Let's go to Robert Kennedy. Basically, I'm really excited about his pick because he has a deep understanding from a scientific standpoint of the poisons that are in our food, in our medicines, and things like that. No, do I agree with Robert Kennedy on everything? No, I don't. But I do know that he has a wealth of knowledge, and I know what he speaks of from a scientific standpoint because I've done a deep dive into that myself. And I've been doing that for decades. And the things that he is saying are substantial and are backed and substantiated by scientific findings. And if he can go in there and do a purge in the health and human services area, this would be great for the country. A lot of the foods that we eat here are not allowed in Europe, and we need to be taking a second look at this. And I think that Robert Kennedy would be the disruptor that we need to bring that agency and our companies that are adding additives to our food that are so deleterious to our health. So here, that's basically what we need. I could go down. There's a lot more with regards to what Trump has picked as for his cabinet, but he needs to get what he is asked for because he knows what happened in his first administration, and he's got about 18 months. Think about this. In 24 months, we're going to have midterm elections, and that's where we may lose our majorities. That's why you've got about 18 months basically to get something done. We can't spend a year or two trying to get his nominations confirmed. So you get on the phone with your representatives or your senators and you tell them you put them in office to help Trump. You put them in office to help protect your life, liberty, and your freedoms. So don't delay on that. Trump deserves what he's asked for. Now, with regards to recess appointments, now there's some rumor, and it hasn't been substantiated yet, that Mitch McConnell, who I've carried a lot of water for in the past. I've known him for decades in my years in political service. It sounds like something he'd say, but I haven't confirmed it, and I'd be disappointed if he did say it, but he said there's not going to be any recess appointments. Well, let me tell you this. Every president has had recess appointments. It's nothing unusual. Obama had 31. George Bush had 171. Every president has had recess appointments. Now, if they won't give it to him, I think one of the things that Trump could do under the Constitution is basically call for not the recess, but for the adjournment of Congress. And at this point, let me just read this to you from the Constitution itself. And it's basically Section 3. So it's Article 2, Section 3 of the Constitution. And it says, the president may, on extraordinary occasions, convene both houses or either of them And in case of disagreement between them, with respect to the time of adjournment, he may adjourn them to such time as he shall think proper. He shall receive ambassadors and other public ministers. Again, that's Article 2, Section 3 of the Constitution. So he could resort to that. The whole main thrust and point of this is that we can't wait for these senators to play around with his picks as they did in his first term, where I think there were some appointments that took 1 or 2 years. He was halfway through his administration before he got what he wanted. That's unacceptable. That's the Senate not doing their advice and consent. You know, as the old saying goes, justice delayed is justice denied. Well, that's where they can no longer do that. And we need to get these picks confirmed very expeditiously. Okay, I want to address 2 other quick points here. One is with regard to DEI, particularly in Kentucky, is still allowed, but there is no Republican that has any excuse to allow DEI to live another day because it's nothing but racism. But a more poignant example is what happened here, I think it was just last week, where the head of the DEI department with the Jefferson County Public Schools basically said to the students that white people don't care. And he was saying this to the black kids. He says, white people don't care about you and will harm you. Now, that's paraphrasing, but he's wiped that off and he's wiped some of his other racist tweets off. But I've called for his immediate resignation or firing. And of course, we've got a leftist superintendent that won't do it. But public pressure needs to be brought for this type of person and this particular person to be fired from his job, because if the Democrats call you racist all the time and are always yelling racism, when the opportunity comes and it's actually as blatant as this is, there should be no time gap between them being fired or terminated and their having said something like that. He is really inciting violence between students, and that's a division that we can't stand for. We've got to wipe this out, and that's why DEI is so detrimental to society, to our companies. It's costing us billions of dollars, so we have to get rid of it. So having said that about DEI, I want to finally end with this. In summary, what we're going to do with the podcast is that we're going to have a segment called Ask Jack. And you can go to bluegrasschronicles.com and submit your questions there. And for instance, here's a question from a listener, and I'll read it to you. Hi, Jack. There is a video circulating online from an MSNBC interview with a Yale psychiatrist resident who is recommending that leftists cut off conservative family members this holiday. What do you think about this? Well, let's look at the video first.
Are people challenged with the idea of how do you interact with people who you know voted for this, right? If you are an LGBTQ person and you know someone in your family voted essentially against your rights, or you're a woman knowing that, this man was calling people the B word, J.D. Vance was literally calling Kamala Harris the trash and said, we're going to take out the trash. I know a lot of Black women were incredibly triggered by that. And if you then meet somebody and they voted for the people who called you trash, or if you're Puerto Rican, and someone voted that way, do you recommend, just from a psychological standpoint, being around them? We got the holidays coming up.
So I love that you asked this question because, there is a push, I think just a societal norm that if somebody is your family, that they are entitled to your time. And I think the answer is absolutely not. So if you are going into a situation where you have family members, where you have close friends who have voted in ways that are against you, like what you said, against your livelihood, and it's completely fine to not be around those people and to tell them why, to say.
Wow. Well, consider the source. Joy Reid, a dying program, but it's so apparent. She's such an overt racist herself. But just think about that. When was the last time you ever knew a leftist or somebody that was liberal to hold their voice or to hold back on their opinions? They don't. So if they have that right and they exercise that right pretty freely, you need to do that too. Again, this goes back to confrontation, and there's nothing wrong with it. We need to be bold, conservatives, patriots, Republicans, anybody that cherishes their freedom. You need to have the right to speak up, and particularly in your family. How else are they ever going to know that the lie that they're living or believing is a lie unless they get challenged by family members? And what does it mean to be family? Yes, it means to be together. It means to be able to speak your mind and speak your piece. So no, can you imagine her as, what was her title, a psychiatrist or in psychiatry? Well, this is the kind of stuff we're getting out of the Ivy Leagues anyway, so that's no big surprise. But anyway, let's just exercise some common sense here. This is family. Families don't always agree, but you've got to have conversation. You can't shut it down. You can't cancel your family. And guess what? If they do cancel you, then are they really worth being your family? What did Christ say with regards to who's your family? It's your brothers and sisters in Christ anyway. So there's a lot of black sheep in your family. Just don't listen to that. Engage in conversation. Exercise your freedom at the Thanksgiving table this year. So with that, folks, it's good having you. Hope to see you next week.